Yeah, the revelations now televised. A platform for you and I, and now look with full heart and clear eyes. Now, these are just my thoughts. Truth on how I feel on these topics I reveal. Please know my toll, I always keep it real. Can't face the word if you can't face facts. For your time, just open up your mind. That's it, just live, think big, now take that. With God in me, this here was made by design. Yeah, the revelation will be televised. REVELSations.
Welcome back to the REVELSations Podcast. I am really happy and excited to have this special guest on today. He and I share the same first name. We've worked together for several years at a previous location. And welcome, Tim Moon, to the show. Welcome, man.
Welcome. Thank you. Nice to be here.
All right. So I know you. We've worked together for several years, but my audience doesn't know you. So how about you introduce yourself, tell the people a little bit about the person they're going to be hearing from today and actually learning from today, because we're going to get into some very important things: spirituality, recovery, sobriety, and all these other things. But let them know who they're hearing from today.
Okay. My name is Tim Moon. I am a longtime administrator and teacher in private Christian schools. And I also am an author. By the way, I was a history teacher for the most part. A new recent author. And I've gone through several different, what I would call spiritual awakenings, or at least two that were pretty significant. So those things tend to come up with the podcast that Timothy does. So I thought it might be a good topic to discuss. But anyway, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's great. And I've heard a couple of your podcasts, and I'll be honest with you. You were talking about some struggles you had, and let's get into that first. And here's the thing. I think you were struggling with some of these things when we were working together, and I had no clue. So how about like sobriety? And I don't think I'm out of bounds by saying this, because you said it on previous podcasts, your struggle with alcoholism and now your recovery from alcoholism. So, and from what I understand from the timeline of listening to the podcast to now, you and I knew each other when you were struggling in this area, and I never knew. So how about you talk a little bit about just that story? Go for it.
Actually, it's been since I undergone recovery and completely stopped any use of alcohol or any other illicit drugs or anything. That was about 7 years ago.
Okay.
So
we were working together 7 years ago. Yes.
It was probably just at the end when you started.
Fair enough.
So and part of that recovery was doing a gratitude list, and that's how you saw the gratitude list and eventually joined the gratitude list. So but so there was probably some overlap, but not much. And I guess you could call it functional. Some people would call it a functional alcoholism, because I didn't lose jobs, I didn't wreck cars, I didn't lose my mortgage or go bankrupt. Unfortunately, a lot of people do suffer those consequences. So I had other consequences. I was about to lose all those things. I was getting close to losing all those things. But the grace of God brought me through a series of steps and consequences, experiences that changed all of that. So I like to talk about that and help people who might be struggling in the same way. So.
Well, so I just did a quick Google search from the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, NIAA, and it says that 10.5% of Americans, this is the 2002 study, 10.5% of Americans ages 12 years old or older struggle with alcoholism. That is a large percent of the population, and you struggle with that. So when me and you actually met in 2000, at the beginning of 2017. That's where I started at school. And,
Yeah,
you know, we met, you taught history. I teach history as well. So, you know, that's when we met. And if you're saying that's to the tail end of your, well, you know, it was like maybe a little bit of overlap, but that's when you were really finished with your recovery.
November 18th, 2017, I changed my life.
Fair
Okay.
enough. Fair enough. So therefore that year from January, because I actually started in the middle of the year, it was weird. January is when I first started subbing at the school, and then I came on full time later. Yeah. So just talk about, like, maybe not your entire story, just because, you know, for the sake of time, but what made you want to say, you know what, I am done with this. I need to recover, because you said you were functioning at the time.
Yeah, I was, but it was going downhill fast. It wasn't going to be much longer. Okay. So what it tends to be is a progressive disease. And it's, my problem was I couldn't admit it was a disease.
Wow. Okay.
I thought it was a choice, and I just kept making the bad choices. And I'd say one minute I don't want to do this, and the next minute I'd be doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And to the point of being pretty detrimental. I mean, some people, they throw their whole lives away for a bottle, you know, with some chemical substance in it. So, but I kept thinking that I had control of this, and I just had to learn how to control myself and have self-control. And all that did really was drive me to greater failures. Wow. And so when I was willing to admit that it was a disease and that I needed help from other people and other powers, I was able to start recovering and get over and get a grip on this, and then go through the 12 steps with a therapist, and it just opened the doors to recovery. So I had to do that, though. I didn't want to admit it. I wanted to think that I had this, and that's a problem. Okay.
Yeah.
But that made me think. This is where the spiritual awakening thing comes into, because I had been a Christian, and I thinking, well, how can I have, you know, failed so dramatically in this? And or what I thought was a failure. Actually, it was a success, because it brought me to really, really being successful. But the deal was that I always looked at sin as a crime. Okay? And most of the Protestant and most of the Catholic Church still teaches that, because it's founded in original sin. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so I thought, well, why would alcoholism be a disease, but everything else be a crime? You know, so I had to reconcile that. And I reconciled it by saying, going back to the early church and looking at what the early church taught, which was never taught that sin was a crime. They taught that sin was a disease, that we are inflicted with a disease that causes us to be weak and vulnerable and fall. Okay. And if we go into a prison and look at all those guys behind bars, we might be inclined to think, well, you guys are just criminals, you deserve this. But no one would go in a hospital and start condemning people for being in the hospital bed.
Wow. So true.
And Christianity has been going into prisons instead of going into hospitals.
Wow. That's heavy. But you're true. And I think because of that, we sort of imprison ourselves in our guilt. Yeah. And I've struggled with that. And due to talking to a good friend of mine, the lady I do the podcast with, Eden, she has helped me unlock myself just through some conversations about that. And she talked about how when she was literally talking to me and telling me that when I am trying to change based on myself, just as you were saying, you had control of the substance abuse, the alcoholism, it's just going to make it worse. But that's when you have to give that control over. Now, a part of what I struggle with, and I want to ask you about this, is the pride element of it all. I think as humans, we are prideful. And then especially as men, as males, we tend to be very, very prideful. So at some point you said, I needed help. And that's hard for men to admit. So let's talk about how you had to battle with the pride element of, I'm failing, I need help.
Okay, I started going to a 12-step program. It's famous. It starts in the beginning of the phone book if you want to look it up. Okay, and I went there at first because my therapist said I needed to go to more meetings. One a week wasn't enough, and my wife was out the door and ready to sign the deal, right?
Oh,
and
okay.
So I had to listen to my therapist because that was part of the agreement. So I was going to the meetings, but I was really trying to eliminate the consequences without eliminating the behavior, and still trying to get control over it. And but so I was not being honest, and I was still drinking. And but the more I sat and listened to other people talk about their recoveries and their programs, the more I started seeing who I really was, and what the lies I was telling other people, the lies I was telling myself. And then that would have been in August when I started, and I just kept coming. And then I went to a conference that they had here in Texas called Brazos Conference. And I had some experiences there that were very unique. And I had thought God had kind of given up on me because I had failed him so many times with so many excuses. And I figured, so when they said you're going to need to pray and trust God to help you, I thought, well, if I pray, God will know where I am, and I don't want him to know where I am right now. So I wound up at this conference with a whole series of events, being the person at the conference who's the least sober. They have this little ritual that they do to find out how long people have been sober and how short. And I turned out to be the least. So I got this book, the AA book, and they gave me the book, and they didn't know who was going to get this book. A bunch of them signed their names with phone numbers so I could call somebody if I wanted to. And I had to go up on stage. It was pretty embarrassing. But it was also kind of a Twilight Zone type of experience where I went back to my seat. I'm going, how did that happen to me? So as soon as the meeting was over and the speakers were done, I got out of there because I just wanted to get away from all of that. It just was too much for me. And I went back to my room and got in bed. And then I picked up that book that they'd given me, and I started thumbing through it. And I noticed that people had written page numbers. And so I started going to the page numbers, and they were underlined. And I'm thinking, and under one of them was, don't look to, if you're separated from or divorced or something, don't look to restoring relationships as a means of something you have to do to recover, but look to God and trust God and seek to have that relationship and that confidence, and let the other stuff come or not come as it may. And I'm thinking, how did they know? How does this person know that I'm in this situation? They didn't know who was going to get that book. There was 1,000 people in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a couple other ones that were noted. And I thought, what do they do? It was like it was speaking to me. And I said to it made me sense that God still did want to help me and did care about me, because I had really given up on that. And so I just used that as my day. I made that day my sobriety day.
Wow.
And
that date again? Can you
sobriety day? It was November 17th. I think I went to the next day and just made it November 18th.
Okay.
And 2017. November 18th, 2017.
That's awesome.
And from then on in, I never had another drink.
Wow.
Haven't had one since. Won't have one again if one day at a time. So,
Yeah.
but no, I have no interest in it. And then I really got serious about getting honest and doing the steps with my therapist and following through on the sobriety. And I did that. I started really that time listening to a lot of podcasts and a lot of YouTube videos of speakers in AA who've recovered. And because I really made it, I wanted to know what recovery is. I wanted to understand my disease and why I had gotten to this point, and then how to recover. And I just began filling my brain with recovery-oriented stuff, and what kind of physiological things we go through, what kind of spiritual things we go through, what kind of programming we go through with our brain and our DNA and our genetics. So I just made a study of recovery, and I still am doing a lot of that, but also going into spirituality and God and the need for God to overcome not just alcoholism, but just life. I mean, frankly, just life, right?
Yep.
Life isn't easy. Life isn't easy, but it can be just an amazing experience every day if you can get up and do it for the right reason.
Absolutely.
And
let me say this to you really quickly before we continue. So I have never struggled with like substance abuse. So but I have family who has. But I think I've read books on recovery. There's a book called Recovery: Freedom from Our Addictions by Russell Brand. I read that book because I think that even if we're not addicted to, like, when people say addiction or the disease of addiction, we automatically think drugs and alcohol, but we can be addicted to a myriad of things, anything. So I think recovery is relatable to everyone in some way.
I agree. And if you recover and you are successful in sobriety, it's because you're successful in emotional sobriety.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's what I wanted to get to next. So you had this spiritual awakening that you're speaking of, and the emotional sobriety. So let's get into a couple of those things first. So how would you define emotionally sobriety, and how would you define spiritual awakening? So first start with those two definitions, and then talk about how those help lead you to your recovery.
Okay. The emotional sobriety I would define as your well-being, your spiritual well-being, being independent of what happens around you.
Okay.
So your circumstances, your events, people, places, institutions, all of the things that we think, if we can control those things or manage those things, the disturbances inside, the restlessness inside will go away. And it's exactly the opposite. We need to find our satisfaction inside. And then the outside, Jesus said, as you clean the inside, the outside will be clean. Well, if we learn to trust God in our heart and just let go and rest in Him, and let these other things work their way out, even though it doesn't always look like they will, but just be willing to say, I don't know the answer. I have sometimes no idea how things are going to work out, but I know that He's bigger than me, and I can let go and let Him handle it. And then all these outside things kind of get worked out. I get answers and of how I should do things. I wait and ask Him for help. And then I rest in Him and in the present moment. That's another real important thing. Before, the experience I had in college when I became a Christian the first time, I shouldn't say the first time, when I became a Christian formally, maybe that's a better way.
Yeah.
I had it's a kind of an evangelical, charismatic type experience. And it definitely changed. I can't I can't. It was a big change. I had amazing things happen to me. In fact, God told me not to drink anymore, to stop drinking. I didn't know why. I didn't understand it, but I just did it because I felt like that's what he told me to do. And later on, I got mature and thought I could be mature about it. But the difference was that was an experience. It was God is over here and I'm over there, or God's over there and I'm over here. And my job is to get where he is. It was a dualistic, three-dimensional, four-dimensional reality type experience. And I always felt like I had to do something, even though they say faith by grace, but
Yeah.
they say that. Everyone says that, but the first thing they start doing is putting up a bunch of rules for you.
Yep.
And at least that was my experience. I don't know if that's the experience, but it was
I think that's the standard. Yeah, like that's the handbook. That's the beginner's Christian handbook rules.
It's exactly the opposite of what I found was that I began to understand God in a non-dual way. And a non-duality is this, that everything is connected as one. And God is the source and creative source and intelligence of everything. And we are created in him. And so we have to be in him. We are divine creations. We were made divinely. We are made in the image of God, and we're supposed to be in him. When we are not in him, we dry up. Just like a drop of water would dry up on a rock if it's not in the river. And we start to dry up because we're not connected. And our problem is we're not consciously connected to to God on a regular, all the time basis. We are doing our things and trying to manage the world around us alone.
Wow. Yeah.
And it doesn't work. We're bad managers. But if we will let go and trust him and listen to him and experience him, it'd be like in water. If you're in the shallow end of a river, you can't walk in up to, let's say, your waist and say, okay, river, let's go. I'm not any different. You're not taking me anywhere. I'm still in the same spot. People do that with God all the time. Because they never get to a place where the water's deeper than they can stand in.
Yeah.
Okay. They never get to where they are completely under the control of the water. And so they never understand that freedom to let go and trust God and allow him to help us live our lives, to live our lives together in a way, and to really trust and let go. And we spend so much time fighting. Fighting, can't let go. Gotta be in charge of this. Gotta have control over this. And all that does is lead to greater failure, I think.
I agree. I think I think that's a part of the fall of man, this sense of control. Because if you think about it, think about it, like, why did Satan fall from heaven? Because he wanted control. He did not want to like be under God's authority, or however, whatever adjective you want to put in there. He didn't want to be under that, and he wanted to be in control. And since we live in a fallen world, that is the biggest struggle, to let go of that control. You mentioned something earlier that we're so disconnected from God and we're trying to do things on its own. And it just reminded me of John 15 when he talked about the vine and the branches. And when he said in verse 4, remain in me as I remain in you, no branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. So this disconnectedness that we have from God does not allow us to bear the fruit that we are meant to bear. We're a vine out here. We're a branch out here, disconnected from the vine, and we're trying to be. So we need to be connected in order to have control. So I thought it was there. So that's the emotional part. Talk about the spiritual awakening that comes along with the emotional sobriety.
Well, for me, it's just awareness that God is everywhere, and if God is everywhere and you're somewhere, you're always connected.
There it is.
You can't get away. But if your mind is everywhere except for him, with him, you're not going to be. You're going to feel disconnected, but it's purely you that's imposing that on yourself.
Yes. God doesn't walk away from us. We walk away from
Never.
him.
And I don't like it when people say chase after God. I know it's in the Bible, but I don't like it because God's not running from you.
Right.
Why don't you just stop running from him?
Yes. Yes.
So
exactly.
that's what and I think the fall of man was the desire to be in control and to make myself look good.
Yep.
To earn this so I can have brownie points.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
the fall. We don't really create out of that experience. Most of the great creators create just because they're having a good time and they want to learn something or they want to know something or they really want to invent something. They're not trying to prove how important they are to God.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Absolutely.
and I think that's where creativity comes. But we have to be willing to let go and let God. I used to think that was a cliche because I never did it.
Okay. So
Okay.
I have a question now. So now that you have gone through your sobriety, your emotional sobriety, and your spiritual awakening, and you're more connected, tell me about the difference in the fruit that you are bearing to the world. Like how more effective, how greater, like, do you feel like your contributions to the world are? Like, I know a lot about you and what you do, author, podcaster, teacher, mentor, all of these things. But how have you seen the change in you once you sort of stop trying to be in control and let God sort of, steer the ship, if you will?
Real simple. First of all, because my sufficiency doesn't come from me and me being perfect and having it all together, okay? Then I can just accept, not always. Sometimes I'm still struggling. I'm still a human being. I'm still working through some of this, but
Of course.
I can generally better accept criticism that other people levy toward me because my security is not in their opinion.
Wow.
And
Wow. Say that again. Say that again, because I think people might have missed that one.
Accept criticism levied toward me because my security and identity is not in their opinion.
There it
However,
is.
sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes it's a combination of both when you get criticized. So all I have to do is say, well, what is this? It could be right. And if it is, I said, well, okay, well then how can I fix this? How can I do, not so I can be good enough, just so I can be a normal human being that's progressing and trying to be better at what at living life, right?
Yep.
And or I can say, wait, you know what? There's times when my wife criticizes me for stuff, and I just say, that's all right. That's your opinion. I think that's fine. I understand why you have that opinion, but I just think in this case, it's just not being applied right. And it's not, I don't have to take it personal. I used to take a lot of stuff personal.
Mm-hmm.
And really, and then I would get upset and I would overreact and I would do something that didn't help anybody. And it was, or me. And it was because I felt like I wasn't enough. And if I admitted to critiques that people were levying, I would not be good enough. And I'm supposed to be good enough. Well, I've got kids, I've got all these things, I've got jobs, I've got these things. I'm supposed to be good enough. I'm not supposed to be good enough anymore. I don't have to be good enough.
Wow.
I can't be anyway.
Wow. That's amazing. That's some great self-realization. And I think that's a big part of it as well.
And then you just try to do, this is simple, but it's one of the best phrases I've ever heard. Do the next right thing.
Yep. Do the next right thing. I agree.
Because I'm going to fail. Everybody fails. Okay. I hope it's less and less as I get older and mature more, but I'm still going to make mistakes and fail. And so what I need to do is really quickly, instead of dwelling on the failure, I can really quickly say, okay, I'm going back into doing it the right way.
Yep.
And just doing the next right thing. I know in sports, I've heard the saying in sports say, make the next day or the next stacking days. You know how they
Yep.
stack days?
Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
we can stack moments. And just because you do the play wrong one time doesn't mean you can't come right back and do it right the next time. Because
Mm-hmm.
you have to develop muscle memory, right?
Yep.
You develop muscle memory by doing it over and over. So if you can keep going back to immediately switching your mindset, okay, yes, I blew that. Now, what's the next right thing I need to do?
Yeah.
Then you get a habit of thinking that way.
Yeah. So I agree. Like, it's about stacking days. I've said this before. Somebody's vision of me is not a true reflection of my value. Like, there could be something wrong with their vision. That doesn't necessarily mean just because
It
they
happens.
think I'm low doesn't mean that I'm low. So I know, and you mentioned this at the very beginning of our conversation, and you and I, it actually, I remember it. It started in 2019 when you introduced it to me. And this is the grateful list where we list 5 things
Yep.
every single day. So I remember it was November of 2019. This was one of the lowest points in my life. I had gone through a terrible breakup. I had lost some very close family members in like a short amount of time. So I was going through hell. I was at my wit's end. I had just started therapy. And you came to me one day and you asked me, would I be interested in writing 5 things out every day, sending them to you, things that I'm grateful for? You would do the same. Now, it's 2019. This is 2024. We've been doing this for 5 years. Can you explain? Yeah, every day. Can you explain where that came from? And more importantly, how being grateful has helped you along your path?
Oh, absolutely. My therapist, it was one of the conditions for doing therapy was I had to do that. And when I first started doing it, I thought this is stupid. But I only did it because he told me to do it. I just thought, geez, this is dumb. But I did it because I didn't want to get worse, everything to get worse. So, but after a couple months, I started seeing this is really changing me. I was really changing as a result of it. And now the science is very clear that if you focus on things that you're grateful for, it changes the programming in your brain. You see the world different.
Yeah.
And you begin to get healthier. It helps your health.
Yeah.
It helps your well-being, your general psychological well-being. It has a lot of benefits. Now I think it's one of the most important things I do. I get up in the morning. The first thing I do is gratitude list because it sets my day and it sets my focus.
Yes, it does. Yes.
And then I do some prayer and meditation. And if I have time left over, I read. I read some good spiritual, I read a lot of the Bible. I read a lot of other books too. And that just kind of reemphasizes important principles and truths, that are valuable to you. So those 3 things, if I can do all of them, it's great. If I can only do a couple of them, it'll be gratitude and prayer. And
there
meditation.
it is. And yeah, you and I do that every day. And I needed it at the time because I wasn't grateful for anything. I was, woe is me. The world is caving in. Nothing's going well.
That's right.
And when you brought it to me, it forced me to change my mindset. And that does not mean that all those negative things that I was going through went away. They didn't. What I did was I changed my view to the things that I did have. And when I began to look at the things that I do have, it makes those things that I don't have or those things that are not going well seem a little less strong. And when you do it every single day, as you said, it sets the day, it sets the mood. And it could be something as great as I am thankful for life to I am thankful for clean water, and anything in between. You're just being mindful and grateful. And I do believe gratefulness, being grateful for things, leads to greater happiness and greater production.
Yeah. And freedom.
Yes.
If you're freer, you're going to be more creative.
Yes.
When you're not free, it's hard to be creative.
Absolutely. So speaking of your creative gene, so you said earlier that you've written a book, right?
Yeah.
You're an author now. So tell me about that. Tell me what brought that on. I have your book can be found on Amazon. It's called Tomato Fields. It's by Tim Moon. It can be found on Amazon. and paperback. You can get it on Kindle as well. And currently you're putting it on Audible. Am I correct?
Audiobook. Probably
Audiobook,
yeah,
yeah.
on Audible.
On Audible,
but
yeah.
it will
So
be,
talk to us about the book.
well, it was an idea I had a while ago, but I just was not in any position to focus. And I had to fix some other things first in my life, because writing a book is very hard. It's intensive, and you really have to put effort in. It just doesn't just happen. Everybody or many people want to write a book, few do. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I needed to be able to focus. But after I experienced recovery and began to mature in that, I said, I've got to finish this now. I got to really put my hand to something, because I know I wanted to write more, but I got to finish the one I started. I can't just skip that and move on and start writing other things. So I felt like I needed to finish that. So I really put effort into it and started working on it. And it took me about 5 years to get there, to get it ready and publish it. And it is a book about cryptid creature that shows up and surprises everyone and causes lots of problems and requires people to come outside themselves to fix and get into uncomfortable situations that they can't understand. That's the whole idea. It's kind of like Jaws in the forest. and it's a book that just forces people into situations they're not comfortable with, and normal people, regular people, and then watches how they deal with that, reconcile those differences. So and it's kind of horror adventure. So,
and I have not, I'll admit, I know about the book. I haven't read it yet, but you're doing Audible, so that's the best way to get it for me. So as soon as that's out, I'll be checking that out. I travel a lot, and I'm an auditory learner. That's sort of why I have a podcast, because talking and hearing is the best way that I can learn. And you spoke earlier about how being creative and being spiritually awakened and being emotionally sober helps with your creativity. And this is proof. Yeah. You had this idea, but you were not in the mental or emotional space to do it. You went through the things that you had to do, and now here's the fruit, a creative piece like Tomato Fields.
And now I'm writing the sequel.
There it is. That's fantastic.
I'm working on other things too. So I'm going to do a lot of writing, but and then I'm seeing all kinds of miracles. It's just hard to the little things that happen where you just blows your mind, and that you could not have ever orchestrated that.
And the vision of those things, like I imagine that when you are in a darker place as you once were, when we're in darkness, it's harder to see these great things that are happening around us. Even I, you and I have talked through text message about, you listened to a previous podcast where I struggled with hearing from God, seeing God, and things of that nature. Well, I was in a darker place, but now that I'm more in an enlightened place, I can see and I can hear a little bit better. So how about touching on what, like, coming into this lighter place, not only has it helped you with Tomato Fields, but just being grateful and all these things, how has it made you more aware of the great things that God is doing in your life and around your life?
Well, if you, like you said, if you're not distracted by all the things that you think are not going right and aren't going the way you want them to go, you can look around and see all the things that are going right. There's a lot of things going right. One of the parts of my recovery, I started listening to a lot of spiritual literature. Have you ever listened to near-death experiences?
I have not. I've had a near-death experience personally, like me, myself. I've had one, but I've actually had two.
In a sense that you saw God, or that you did a life review, or that you just saw yourself outside your body, or what?
Well, for me, it changed my path. Just when, like, so it actually got me to the school where you and I worked. Real quick story. I always equate myself to Jonah. God had me on a path. I didn't like the path that God had me on, so I decided to go somewhere else. I had a tragic experience where My brother and we both got caught in a rip current. Unfortunately, he didn't make it. I did. But the amazing thing about that story is 1 hour, literally 1 hour before he passed away, he told me, he said, Timothy, life is too short. We have to live out God's plans. An hour later, he passed away from drowning in the ocean. I was in the same rip current. Somehow God spared me, didn't spare him. And that turned my life back into what I knew God wanted me to do. And that's to impact the lives of young people through education. So that's my near-death experience and how it really turned my life around.
You just got close to dying.
Yes. It literally close to dying. Yes.
Well, the near-death experiences that I'm talking about are people that actually die.
Oh, okay.
They leave their body, and either they can be out-of-body experiences where they see themselves from above or something, or they can actually go into other dimensions and see God and have life, what they call life reviews and things like that.
Okay.
And what attracted me to them at first was that they were telling the after effects that they had because of that experience. Mm-hmm. And one of them was they're not afraid of people anymore. They're not as materialistic as they used to be. They're more interested in spirituality and helping people and taking care of people and putting other people before themselves. And I thought, well, that's the experience I'm having. I mean, I didn't die and go to heaven and talk to God, but I'm having the same experience. So there was a degree of that, at least, in my recovery. And those things all changed me. I wasn't the same person anymore. I have different values and different things that I think are important. I still have some of the same values, but it's just not all the same motive, I guess. Wow. So I can't remember exactly why that came up, but it was interesting.
Well, so. No, I was just asking more or less like how, like you see more, like now that you're not in the dark anymore, you can see the miracles and these great things in your life and that God is providing for you.
Well, I'll tell you a story about in school. How's that? Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
I remember during the time you were there, okay, we were there together. I was thinking, I was seeing God in animals. I was seeing God in nature. That might sound funny, but sometimes I could touch things and feel energy from them. And it's not woo-woo. I'm not, but I think everything is energy now. So it's easy for me to experience energy. And
understood.
Well, but sometimes it was harder with people because people irritate, it's just, sometimes it's harder with people to see divinity and see God. Okay. And I was in class one day and I'd been asking God, show me you in them. And this girl, one of the girls in class, she's an 8th grader. All of a sudden she looked at me with a smile and I could see the radiance of God just radiating out of her.
Wow.
That's awesome. Through her eyes. And it wasn't because she was the perfect student or she got straight A's and everything, or she never did anything wrong. It doesn't matter what they did. It was because she was created in the image of God.
There it is.
And I saw that. And that energy just kind of burst out of her. And I don't think anyone else noticed it, but it just was very aware to me, for me. And that's the kind of thing I think if we're paying attention, if we're not, it's not even paying attention. It's not paying attention to other things. It's just when you're in meditation or in mindfulness, it's not never having a thought. It's that idea about not thinking. As soon as you stop thinking, you're probably dead. Okay?
Yeah.
Because your brain thinks just like your heart beats. Okay? And you don't want your heart to stop beating, do you?
No.
Okay, so but you don't have to take every thought that comes to your head and play with it. The key with meditation is not playing with and taking them all out and expanding them and making them bigger. And it's just, yes, they're there. You notice it and you move on.
Yeah.
And that's the real key. That's the discipline of it. It's just letting things go. And then, but when you're driving, if you focus on just one thing while you're driving, you're going to hit something else.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
When you're driving, the good drivers, you just have to have an awareness of everything around you without focusing on anything.
Yep. That's perfect example. Yeah.
That's what meditation is.
There it is.
That's what it is. If you focus too much, just stop and go back to just being aware and trying that. And it's not easy because we're humans and we want to focus on things and make them bigger than they are. But if you can do that, that's when you can become aware of everything. And it's in being aware of everything by not focusing on anything that sometimes you see those miracles.
Wow. When you're not focused on one thing, but you're aware of everything, that's when you can see. That's amazing. Isn't that
amazing?
That is amazing. That's been
my experience. That's been my experience. So,
well, as we wrap up here, we got a couple more minutes. If someone said, okay, I've listened to this podcast, I've listened to Tim Moon, but I want one great takeaway from Tim Moon. I want to soak in some wisdom. What is one thing? Does not matter what it could be about sobriety, spiritual awakening, emotional intelligence, anything. What would be a lasting thing that you would want to share with the people from your experience, your life, your wisdom, etc.?
Okay. What comes to me right now is I see a lot of people struggling with the notion of God. And you talk about sobriety or recovery or emotional sobriety or awakening, and as soon as you say the God word, I'm out. And I think a lot of that is because you have had experiences with people or institutions that have framed God in a way that wasn't right. Okay. And you have your father or your mother was abusive in some way. I personally had experiences with an abusive parent. And then you think, or we think, that when we hear the word God, we're hearing all of those things that happened to us that we heard that we just couldn't buy into. Okay. That's what someone's talking about when they say God. Okay.
Wow.
And I think that causes us to move away from what we really need, because you were created, whether you want to admit it or not, you were created in an image of a divine creator. And either war or all of this life is for nothing.
Yep.
Because if that's not true, we're just nothing. We're just random. We don't have any value or purpose. Okay. But I think it is true that you are created. We are all created. So ask God to show you. Don't just distance yourself from him because of what someone else or something else taught or believed. Because my understanding of him has changed radically in 7 years. It just has. And my theology is different. But it was because I was willing to suspend some of my prejudices. And you can be prejudiced for God, or you can be prejudiced against God. You can have bad understandings of a God you do believe in, or you can have bad understandings of a God you don't believe in. But it's still prejudice, and we have to drop a lot of that to really grow in a God you can't understand. In all the days of your life, you still won't be able to understand him completely.
Wow.
So you have to just have a little faith, childlike faith.
Yep. And here's the thing about faith. We actually all have faith. Everybody has faith in something. Everybody has faith in something. And I agree. I summarize what you said in a phrase I call church hurt. And it may not directly come from a church, but it's a person who had a God type presence in your life that hurt you, who used God as a weapon to hurt you in some way. They weaponize God in a way. And you're right. I believe that is the number one deterrent from people turning away from God. And I just, the earth is too perfect. Humans are, when I say too perfect, I don't mean we're perfect in our actions, but our countenance and the way we procreate and the way we act and just move is too perfect to not have a creator. This can't be by happenstance. It can't be. Like the word, it doesn't make logical sense for Earth, humanity, the solar system to be by happenstance. It's too perfect to not have a creator that created it. So I do believe people struggle with church hurt, and it has caused a lot of people to move away. And you're right. It's because they were introduced to God in a negative way. And that's sad.
And a lot of times I think you get into this do's and don'ts,
Yep.
and you become really blinded
Mm-hmm.
to everything else that's out there, that God has available for us. But we're so focused on our personal do's and don'ts or our personal doctrines, that we miss it. We miss it a lot
Exactly.
because He's bigger than all of those doctrines, and some of those doctrines are just flat wrong. Okay,
There
they're
it is.
flat wrong. Well, some of the things that the church has justified teaching has been ridiculous.
I
And
agree.
so and it's okay to say that. God's not going to be upset if you disagree with some doctrine that someone else holds. So
Right.
anyway, those are just thoughts
There it
that
is.
I
Well,
hope
thank
were
you so
helpful.
much for
Thank you.
joining. Your wisdom has been something that I admire. Again, I think you were a part of it, like unbeknownst to you, you were a part of a team of people that God put in my life to help me recover when I was going through a probably the darkest time of my life. And just being and God softened my heart that day that you brought the idea of the grateful list to me, and I appreciate it. It's been life changing, and we've been doing it ever since, and we will continue. But again, Tim Moon, your book is called Tomato Fields. It's available in paperback. It came out in January of 2023. You can find that wherever books are sold. Hey everyone, you just finished listening to the interview with Tim Moon. Sorry for the abrupt break there. We were wrapping anyway, and I had some technical difficulties with recording. But again, you can find Tim's book called Tomato Fields at Amazon.com. Also, thank you, Tim, for joining the show. We appreciate it. Hopefully, you guys got something from that on spiritual awakening, emotional sobriety, etc. Check us out next time, and we'll be back soon with the next episode of the REVELSations Podcast.